Welcome to the Mile High Hockey Lab.
Hello and welcome to a very, very special edition of the Mile High Hockey Lab. I am here today with Ezra and Evan of milehighhockey.com. And I tell you what, we got some stuff to talk about today, and it's not even Friday. We're talking Avalanche trades. And if you missed it, folks, we're not even going to do the intro. We're just going to go straight to the talk about the trade and an open floor. We're going to see what you folks have to say. We'll bounce a little bit off of all of you as well. So thank you for tuning in. Let's start with the Johansen trade, along with the 2025 conditional first round for Sean Walker and a 2026 fifth round pick from the Philadelphia Flyers. We're going to start there, and we will save the big stuff for about 5 minutes from now. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. We're just going to open the floor.
Can we last that long?
Yeah, I was going to say. But, Evan, I'll send this one your way. Let's just do this. We'll introduce them both. We also had, of course, Bowen Byram, 1-for-1 for Casey Mittelstadt from the Buffalo Sabres, which adios to a very beloved Colorado Avalanche in Bowen Byram. Thank you, sir, for your services. We appreciate you here in Colorado. But Evan, let's get your initial reaction to just this crazy 30 minutes in the history of Colorado Avalanche.
Man, yeah, you say we just have some stuff to talk about. I think we have this is maybe the most stuff that we've ever had to talk about on this show. It's like they knew that it was it's like they knew it was MHH Lab podcast.
Exactly.
Day. So,
thank you.
I know, thank you, Avalanche. Yeah. So I will not lie. I was laying in bed this morning when all this came about. And I was initially, kind of shocked, blown away, because the first thing I saw was the first rounder for Walker. I was like, okay, that's a lot. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. And then came the Ryan Johansen news, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like somebody actually agreed to take on that contract, and let alone a contender for that matter. Yeah. And then said contender put Ryan Johansen on waivers right after that.
Immediately.
So he's still out there technically. Yep. But then the return came in, and that's great as ever. What's that?
Let's claim him back.
Oh God.
Yeah, right? Oh my God. Can you imagine?
Well, and that's the funny thing too about all of this. So Johansen's move, plus the Mittelstadt stuff, which we'll get into later, actually gained some cap space for the Avalanche. Yeah, when has a team gotten better and gotten more cap space? That is unreal. So I mean, it's masterclass, unbelievable. And I know people were on Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic, like, you have to make a move, especially with SHIT going down, right? Yeah. So you'd think that something would have happened, right? Especially after last year with Lars Eller really being the only move, and the Avs ended up not being contenders. All of these moves today signify that they are going for it. And I'll save my reservations for those later on.
Well, and I like the way you put it, going for it, because that was my initial reaction. I think everybody kind of reacted the same way once the initial news of the Johansen and a first round for Sean Walker dropped. It was like, a first rounder for Sean Walker. Oh God, what are we doing? What are we doing? And then it was actually pretty funny in our little Slack chat. We were kind of all like, well, this has to mean that they're bringing in somebody or they're getting rid of a defender, because there's just too many now. We have that, second pair defender, and then the name Bowen Byram immediately came up, and then minutes later, there it was. Bowen Byram was on Kevin Week's video, and we were like, oh my goodness, it actually just happened. And Ezra, you actually talked about Casey Mittelstadt in one of our episodes, which was way more boring than this one, because we were mixing through the droves of possibilities that could be trade targets for the Colorado Avalanche. And as you put it in the Slack chat, you said, this was my pipe dream pick. So elaborate on that a little bit for me.
Yeah, I mean, I brought him up a while back because I thought, like, he is a perfect fit. He's a guy on an expiring RFA deal like Lehkonen was, and he just made sense for, like, the Avs MO and who was potentially available, because Buffalo had two other top six centers who they want to have as their top six centers, right? In Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins. But Jackie immediately was like, there's no way they swing like that. There's no way that happens. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. But no, I was right.
Yeah. I mean, we usually
I have to say, though, I am wearing black today just to signify, how sad I am about Bowen Byram leaving town.
Yeah,
It's sad. But man,
this is like it will. I know you said it. Yeah, and if Jackie were here too, she would chime in on the Byram stuff as well and say, man, it just sucks that it's Bo, because she's a big fan of Bo Byram, and this whole program really is. We're actually fans of both Bo Byram and Sam Girard, and those two names seem to be the ones that come to the table. I will say though that the Avalanche did a good job of using that equity on the back end, as we talked about in ad nauseum, over the last few months. To shore up that 2C. But we got a question here from Shaq Finland. He says, what do you think we're going to do with that cap space? And I believe as of right now, it's $4.9 million with all things considered. So that's a pretty good little chunk of change. I'll just give my thoughts really fast. I mean, I feel like the Avs are really good. In fact, if Landeskog comes back, there's going to be too many guys up the middle. The lines are going to be difficult. You're going to have to healthy scratch a really good hockey player. And that's scary for the rest of the league. I do think maybe if you have to, you go get a backup goalie. I know Annunen has had 2 shutouts back to back against the Blackhawks, which is literally as much as you can do to not be replaced. But it is the Blackhawks, so it kind of has a little bit of an asterisk to it, especially because those 2 games looked so similar and they were in such a short time frame. It kind of doesn't feel. It wasn't like he shut out the Wild and then the Rangers. It's a different situation. But Ezra, what are your initial thoughts on? Or go ahead, Evan. What do you got for me?
I was just gonna say I want to comment on it. Sorry, Ezra, but so you have to take into consideration that that Kovalenko still needs to come in. And that'll take up, I think, about $1 million or somewhere around that. So they'll be left in with about $4 million, $3.9 million, whatever you want to say. If Landeskog comes back before the playoffs, then you're right. There's a ton of there's a lot of forward space there, and if you make a move for somebody that's another forward, like another Andrew Cogliano-esque, then you're going to be scratching somebody that is a pretty good hockey player. And they did that during that run of the Cup. Remember, Newhook, I think, was scratched for the first game or 2. So it happens. It's bound to happen. So I think if
Burakovsky went down, so they needed to have the guys scratch.
That too. Yeah. So I think if they use the cap space, it'll either be for someone like that or a goaltender. Now, I'm 50-50 on Heinonen right now. I'm not really sure. But the main thing that you have to consider with this cap space is this summer in particular. You have college free agents that are going to be wanting to be signed. The Avs love doing that. They love signing college free agents. You have to build up a prospect pool. Do you sign somebody else like another Ivan, Callum Ritchie, Jeremy Hansel, right? Those sorts of players. Yeah. And then I think more importantly, you're looking at extending Casey Mittelstadt in particular. You need to sign him for a big extension. He's going to need a lot of money. Well, not a lot of money, but he will need more than he has now. Yeah, exactly. The same would go for Sean Walker if you want to keep him in the rotation. So you really have to consider that in particular. Yeah. And so that's where you have to teeter out, like, what do you really push all out for this and really go get somebody else in the next 48 hours? Or do you push back, hang on with what you have, and then focus on your future a little bit more, at least with the signings of making room for the likes of Mittelstadt and Walker and whoever else?
Yeah, I'm with you there. And we got Perry Hellion says, almost midnight on this side of the planet, Czech Republic. So I'm just going to say thanks for the podcast and keep up the good work. And he said, hope you guys upload Spotify right after so we can listen in the morning on the way to work. Right on. I'll do that for sure, Perry Hellion. I got your back, dog. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. But yeah, I agree with everything you had to say there, Evan. I'm kind of at the point now where you have to hope that the last wild card up your sleeve is Landeskog. And you can hang on to that change for another day. And additionally, it helps when Landeskog does come back. If you are going to want, to return Mittelstadt, he's an RFA, awesome situation. That's one of the things we talked about being key in the Avalanche actually going for a 2C and using that defensive equity was making sure that they got a restricted free agent, similar to the Lehkonen situation. Ezra, what do you think of what Evan had to say there? And does this trade feel to you like it does to me a lot like the Kadri trade?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think the Kadri trade is a good comparable because it's a defenseman we all like, but we could see doesn't have a spot, right, for a center that we need. You know, so I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a good comp. I didn't think of it before, so good call. I think talking about what Evan was saying, you know, extending Mittelstadt is going to take some money, but right now Mittelstadt is making 2.5 and Walker's making 2.5. So you assume Walker leaves in free agency to make room for Sam Malinsky on that bottom pair right D spot, right? And then you have $5-ish million to play with for Mittelstadt. He probably comes in closer to 6, maybe even 7. I don't know. If they can get him around in that range, that'd be great. Maybe they go shorter on him and get him for 5 and say, hey, prove it, and then we'll give you a bigger deal, or you make it somewhere else. But they do have to keep cost a little bit low because the Landeskog contract ideally is coming back in the books. Rantanen's going to need an extension. Drouin potentially could need an extension or some kind of, if they want to keep him, you know. So there's a lot to think about there. But for this season, they've got $4 million to play with, and it seems to me like shoring up the backup goaltender position and the 4C position is possible with that money. Kovalenko's going to take some of it for sure. Do you trust Chris Wagner, excuse me, to be the 4C? I've liked him in those last couple games, but he's not really been a face-off penalty kill guy for most of his career. He's been a fourth liner, not a penalty killer. I thought he's been effective in the limited minutes he's seen there on this team, so that's good. But they were definitely like, hey, can you do this job? And the answer is like, kinda, maybe. But we need a guy who the answer is like for clearly yes. Yeah. So I would say going out to get a 4C makes sense. But I do think, considering that there's the extension for Mittelstadt coming, this kind of takes them out of the Nick Dowd conversation because Nick Dowd would have contract on the books for next year as well. And that's $1.2 million that they probably need to go towards Mittelstadt. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's the more you put it out like that, it just feels like this 4C role has to be a rental, which is fine because it's good to have cheap rentals rather than expensive ones. Totally. And you know, like it's the role is very specific, which I like. It's something you can find, I think, because of how specific the nature of the type of role you need, which is someone who can win faceoffs on the penalty kill and who's solid on the penalty kill. And so I think that is something that they can easily do with that $4.9 million and still have some cap space left over. We have some more comments here, and thank you folks so much for tuning in. We have over 300 people tuned in live right now, which is pretty awesome. But Scott Wilson, who's a longtime listener, says, absolutely pumped about these moves. Mittelstadt was a shoot to the moon target, and they nailed it. Walker is Taze light. Hopefully we get a goalie to pair with Gorgiev and go deep this year. So that seems to be kind of what everyone feels bubbling on the surface next is either a goalie move or, as we just talked about, a move for a fourth line center who could kind of fill in that PK role. But I'm starting to feel like the 4C thing makes more sense to me than a backup goaltender because you want to put faith in Annunen. Yeah, Evan, what do you got for me?
I was just going to comment on what Scott said there. Because when you think about the moves that the Avs have made in the last, I don't know, few years, at least at the trade deadline, they do not make the big splashy move that a lot of fans kind of hope for. Mittelstadt is definitely that. And I think he is definitely one of the better centers out there. And I know I said it a few weeks ago, at least, or a few episodes ago, where I said, if you trade a roster player like a Bowen Byram or anyone along those similar lines, you are going for the cup this year. And that I think proves that, right? And I know Adrian, you were on social media earlier about talking about like how Byram would not get a 2C. Maybe you can come around on your comments on that a little bit. But I think another thing too that I want to point out about this is you have Nathan McKinnon, who's having a career year, even better than last year, which is crazy to believe. Having a career year, and you're looking for somebody to help him. Mittelstadt will do that. You bring in Kovalenko. He's gonna help, even if it's bottom 6, where he's likely going to be now. But I think the wild card is this. I think that the Avs made this Mittelstadt move in particular, and made the Sean Walker move, the Byram move, although pretty much every move today. I think they made this move because they believe Landeskog will be back in the playoffs.
Same.
And Bednar, said that, yes, he didn't say yesterday that he will be back, but he is still on track, right? And that is a great sign, right? Obviously phenomenal for Landeskog, the player, the person, that he's living a happy, healthy life, being able to live normally with a now working knee. But if he is able to come back in the playoffs and then, obviously push for a cup, holy moly, that lineup is going to be very dangerous. So I think that's another reason why the Avs are kind of going all in on this too, is because they believe in that. And I know we'll go over later in our not existing script, because we're kind of just going at it today with everything that's happened. I know we will eventually go over lineups now and lineups, when the playoffs begin, projected lineups, all those sorts of things. We'll do that later.
Well, it's an open floor. Let's just go there. Let's go there now, because I'm actually looking at mine as we speak, because you're getting to where my point when we talk about the projected roster. So basically, when the news hit today, folks, everybody was in a whirlwind, and usually we do a script for this show, but I basically just hit the Slack chat and said, all right, let's just do an open floor because we have plenty to talk about. Nonetheless,
we'll do it live.
We'll do it live. Nonetheless, I did ask that everybody bring their ideal round one playoff roster to the table so that we could kind of talk about what this might look like, with the idea of Landeskog on the table and Kovalenko coming over. Things start to get kind of confusing because you're like not wanting to leave someone out of the lineup, and you're going to have to. And so I'll just give you guys mine and see if you guys have any differing opinions or kind of what you think. Ezra, I'll let you react first. So I got Drouin, McKinnon, Rantanen on the first line, with Lehkonen, Mittelstadt, Nichushkin, with Wood, Landeskog, Colton, Cogliano, O'Connor, Kovalenko. You could swap Cogliano or O'Connor for the center on the fourth line. Because then if Landeskog comes back, you have your penalty killing fourth line center. The person is already on the team. It just, you get to slot them down further down into the lineup, and then they become that role in Cogliano and O'Connor. And then the D pairings, I have Taves Makar, obviously, Gerard Manson, and Walker Johnson, with Malinsky and guys like that waiting in the wings. I didn't mention my bench players for the forwards, so I'll let you go there, Ezra. But what do you think of what I put on the table there?
Yeah, I like what you put there. I wonder about I feel like the way Lehkonen's playing on the top line, he's got to stick there. And I wonder if Landeskog or Drouin ends up on the second line left wing. But I like what your head's at. I think the way Drouin's played this year, he's kind of overcome his like defensive liability label, which I love. Like I love that for him as an individual and also for the team, obviously. If he can be a reliable defensive player, then Mittelstadt doesn't have to. We don't have to worry about Mittelstadt's kind of also weaker defensive reputation as much between him and Nichushkin, because obviously Nuke is Selke candidate Nuke.
Right.
But also I was looking into Mittelstadt's numbers this year, and he's not a great defensive player. That's true, but he's very good at recovering pucks in the defensive zone and transitioning out on offense. So he's a guy who plays defense by possessing the puck in the offensive zone, which is kind of the Avs MO, right? So I imagine him fitting in really nicely with whoever the wings are. My only concern with your roster really there is that fourth line center, because I don't think you want to rely on Cogliano or O'Connor to be a face-off winning penalty kill guy. You want them on the penalty kill, of course, but neither of them has shown that they are an elite face-off guy in their careers. And they both really are better suited on the wing. So, maybe it is Kovalenko who plays center on that line, and he's been playing center in the KHL, so there's a chance that's a fit. But maybe it's Wagner, or maybe it's somebody else that they bring in. Yeah. But I love them as a fourth line group. I will say though, you left out Zach Parise.
Exactly. I knew it. I knew I was leaving somebody out. So who do you probably have him in for Kovalenko in my situation, right?
Yeah, or Cogliano. Yeah. I mean, Cogliano's a warrior, but he's been taking a lot of bad penalties because he's just slightly behind the play now. He's a little older. Parise is also a little older, but he's never getting caught like that. I feel like I would put him in the lineup over,
especially in the playoffs. Right, a hungry, cup wanting Parise on the fourth line in the playoffs should be pretty nasty with Cogliano and O'Connor. And we had a comment that made a lot of sense to me too. And I've already, in our fake lineup here, I've moved Landeskog to the right wing with Colton in the center, and I swapped Drouin and Lehkonen, put Drouin as the second winger, because I think we'll know if Landeskog is a top six guy again when he gets back, and see kind of where he's at really in his recovery. Until then, until he's even like on the roster, I can't put him in the top 6. That's my rule right now. But if he comes back and we see that, that's what we hope, is that he can just go back into the top 6. Heck, if he can go back onto the top line and reform what was once one of the most dominant lines in the history of the NHL, look out to the rest of the NHL and the West in the Stanley Cup playoffs, because things could get a little bit crazy. But Evan, let's see what you think right now. After the adjustments, we got Lehkonen, McKinnon, Rantanen, Drouin, Mittelstadt, Nichushkin, Wood, Colton, Landeskog, Cogliano, O'Connor, Parise, with Kovalenko and Wagner as scratches, Taves, Makar, Girard, and Manson, Walker and Johnson, with Malinsky, Caleb Jones and company as the scratches there. This is our projected first round lineup. What are your thoughts, Evan?
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid lineup right there. I do agree with you about the Landeskog take, that that I don't foresee him getting top line, second line minutes right away, or at least sliding in there. I think that I would think anyway that the Avs would want to try and ease him still kind of into game time. Maybe after a game or two, if he's in, that then he would be asked to maybe go up on that second line. And I think kind of the wild card that I would look at too is this. When I think back, I've been watching some of the Stanley Cup reruns again of 2022. So when I'm thinking back to that, Nichushkin was on the first line with McKinnon and Rantanen too. So you could also have him up there, and then Lehkonen second line, or Landeskog second line, however you really want to work around with that, right? I really just think that you need somebody who's a good forechecker, somebody who's going to be really good two-way forward on defense, especially with Casey Mittelstadt there in the middle. Because, like I said, that's probably his weakness in his game is his defensive, his defense, and inability to, I guess, kind of English is hard. What am I thinking of? Forecheck. That's the word.
English.
That's right. I've had to do like 5 articles, writings, and editing today. So it's
the words just start to stack on top of each other.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I think that's really kind of the main priority there. And unfortunately, as much as it sucks, like, yeah, I would see Kovalenko kind of being that first forward out. Which really stinks, because he's obviously really good, right? I mean, there's a reason why the Avs waited so long to sign him and let him, just dominate in the KHL. And now we're giving him a chance over here. So, I mean, that's really unfortunate, right? And I think he'll be kind of bummed about it too. But I think it's kind of the necessary move, at least when I think about it, because he's going to be the one with least experience.
Yeah, well, and it's going to be good to know, though, because like he'll have time before the playoffs to play with the Avs, to kind of let management know and coaches know where he sits and kind of how he's going to perform and what role he could potentially fill. So you're right. Like, the same is true about Kovalenko, I think, is with Landeskog. You can't really put him into like the second line. You better keep him on the bottom end of the middle 6 until he comes over, and until we can really get a firm grasp of just who he is as a hockey player in the NHL in particular. Everybody knows who he is in the KHL, which is a very productive and a very good teammate over there for the Torpedo. So I think they're 1 game away from elimination, correct? So if I think it's 1 or 2 games.
They won game 1, and then I think lost game 2 and 3. So think
they're 2 games from elimination.
I think it's 2, but might have to fact check me on that.
So once Kovalenko's team is eliminated from the KHL, which they're heavy underdogs, the game 1 was kind of an upset when they won. So they should more than likely be eliminated pretty soon here. And then he will come over for the Avalanche and play, I imagine, just as soon as that happens. But I want to double back to the Bowen Byram conversation, because we talked you and me, Ezra, about how it's kind of eerie that this trade feels a little bit like the Kadri trade. And a part of that for me too is in giving up on giving a defender who is very much loved among the fan base in exchange for that 2C. The first time around, it was Tyson Barrie for Nazem Kadri, who at the time, I believe, was at least one of the top 3 point-producing defenders, if not the top point-producing defender. I can't remember. You'll have to check my sources on that. But, fans loved him. In fact, he's Nathan MacKinnon's best friend. So, like, they traded Nathan MacKinnon's best friend to win a Stanley Cup essentially by getting that 2C. And I don't think like this is any different than that, because Bowen Byram was a project, so to speak, for the Avalanche, somebody that they invested time and really care into, with him, experiencing his early concussion problems and stuff like that. They saw him through that, and then he was a Stanley Cup champion, arguably, the second best defender for the Avalanche throughout the playoffs that season. Ezra, what are your thoughts? What will you miss, I guess, about Bowen Byram and what he brings to the table, and kind of just sound off on his time here as an Avalanche?
He was always a guy who I was like, who I loved watching, because I knew there was development to come, but there was so much there already, right? He's a guy who projects as a top line defenseman, but was playing, third pair minutes here at this point in this season, and in past seasons, mostly second pair minutes, and generally pretty excellent in them. I think that's just the on ice component, but then off ice, I mean, we saw his personality at the Stanley Cup parade, and this season with giving Makar a hard time about the money he was going to win at the skills competition, the All-Star, and he's clearly a part of the locker room culture in a big way, and the guys love him. So I think that part of it is going to be hard, but also everybody understands it's a business, and he was inevitably going to get shipped out. I think once they extended Devon Taves, having a hard time talking today, sorry. Once they extended Taves, it was him or Gerard had to go, maybe Manson, but Manson plays the right, so it was probably him or Gerard. And frankly, Byram doesn't have the opportunity to flourish here that he's going to have elsewhere. So it always made sense for it to be him, because he's not a third pair guy. He's a top pair possible, second pair definite kind of guy. I'm so excited to see what Buffalo's defense becomes too. Watching there are some guys who leave the Avalanche and I'm like, okay, see ya. And there are some guys who I'm like, well, I'm going to follow your career for the rest of your life. And Byram is definitely one of those. I'm going to, with EJ over there and kind of Jost, but he's in the minors. It's kind of like Colorado East over there, which is fun. I'll watch Buffalo. And I don't have to worry about meeting them in the Stanley Cup final because they're Buffalo, so it's all good. But I'm excited to see what that looks like, because he's kind of the third fiddle on their defense too, in a way, with Owen Power and Rasmus. Rasmus Dahlin. I was like, that's not right. But and I'm curious if they slot him in as a right-hand defenseman, a right point defenseman with one of those two lefties, or how they make that work. But it's going to be exciting to see him develop in a potential top 4 role there.
I like what you have to say about EJ too, like him going over there to a defensive group that has probably what is, like Bowen Byram all grown up in Erik Johnson. Like you hear about them both being very funny and loved by their teammates inside the locker room. So it's like, at least he has that familiarity, like you mentioned, because this one kind of does hurt a little bit. I know, like I said earlier, if Jackie was on the program, she'd be the one, throwing the salt in about, how unfortunate it is that the Avs are letting go of another young, really good player. And she's always on it about the prospects and stuff like that. So Jackie, we got you back here. We're making sure you're heard, even though you're not with us right now. But we have over 480 people tuned into our live broadcast right now, which is by far the most. So thank you folks so much on behalf of the Mile High Hockey Lab for coming and tuning in and joining the conversation. If you enjoy what you're watching and listening to, please head on over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as every episode is released the following day, and I think we'll try and get this one out tonight so that you folks can listen to it on your way to work if you live in the Czech Republic. And so now we're at 490, so thank you folks so much for tuning in. Please head over to milehighhockey.com as well, and if you're feeling like making a few wagers, you can also head on over to Twitter and follow Lucky Puck. And lastly, we also contribute to a site called Puck Yeti, which is all about Colorado Avalanche coverage. So that's my little shameless drop real quick. Let's get back to talking about these trades. I got Scott Wilson tuning in again. Scott, longtime listener. Thanks, bro. EJ was complimentary partner to Bo, so it's a good spot for him to be. Yes, I absolutely agree. That's kind of where I was headed with what I just said, Scott. But let's keep this thing rolling. Evan, what else you got for me, man?
Yeah, I was going to touch on the Byram and EJ topic again because just as Scott said, those two work really great together. So they're going to get along just fine in Buffalo for sure. And I'm very happy that Bo will have somebody at least to kind of look up to and know already. He's not going to just kind of be left alone. And like if you sent somebody like Arizona or San Jose, like luckily it's not that. And Buffalo will be contenders down the line. He will 100% be in the playoffs still, at least somewhere down the line. That Buffalo team is there's no way that they can't not make the playoffs somewhere in the future. It just didn't pan out this year for them. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I know you guys were talking about how the Byram trade feels very similar to the Kadri trade. I also think it feels kind of similar to when Tyson Jost was traded to Minnesota. Now, obviously, two different trades, right? But I think it's pretty similar in that. Another fan favorite leaves, and you get Nico Sturm back, which sure isn't great, but you got Arturi Lehkonen kind of out of that too, a little bit to an extent, and that's an upgrade. And that he scored the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Avalanche, so I think that's important to point out too. So I think that's really, I think it's unfortunate. For sure. I guess I'll kind of do the talking for Jackie here of like, yes, it definitely does suck that you lose a quote unquote prospect and whatnot. But the time is now, right? You're keeping your cup run open with this Casey Mittelstadt move, and the same goes for the Sean Walker move. Who knows if he'll get re-signed in the offseason. I think that one might be a little bit more difficult to do than Casey Mittelstadt's. But it's just hockey. It's business. It's how it is. So apologies to everyone who has Byram jerseys hanging up in their closets and whatnot. But I do really look forward to watching him in Buffalo, and really makes me only interested in that Buffalo team more than I already was.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, for those fans who are sad about having that 4 up in their closet, I have a Barry jersey and I have a Kadri jersey, and they're both still two of my favorite jerseys. And lucky enough, Bo Byram is a part of Avalanche folklore forever because he was a Stanley Cup champion. So we will always have room in our hearts for Bo Byram. And as Ezra put it a little bit earlier, we're definitely going to be following his career for the rest of his career as a beloved Avalanche alum. But we have some comments coming in, and it looks like this one is from the camp of a Buffalo Sabres fan. And it says, "Take care of Casey," with some crying eyes. So both sides of this trade feeling a little bit of the bittersweet blues, I believe, because in Buffalo, it kind of felt like Mittelstadt. It was either sign him or, it's time to move on. And it feels like this is, we know this is obviously them saying it's time to move on from him. So kudos to you Buffalo fans as well. And we know you guys we'll take care of your guy over here. You do the same for us and we'll call it cool. We also have Jeffrey Jenks says, "Hey guys, Sabres fan here. Just joined in. What's your overall impression of the trade?" That's a good question. Let's talk about it like in terms of from both sides here. Is this one of those situations, Ezra, where it makes sense for both, or does someone seem to have the edge?
I think it definitely makes sense for both. I mean, both players are young guys who've shown what they are at their high end, and we've seen them struggle to be there consistently. Mittelstadt this season has been excellent, but through most of his career, he had a lot of ups and downs. And Byram 2 years ago was excellent, and through the rest of his career, he's had injury problems and ups and downs. So, I think both guys are high pedigree, high potential guys that are worth the gamble that both teams are taking on them. What swings the trade kind of in Colorado's favor, in my opinion, and this might be a little bit of homerism, I'm not sure, I honestly don't know, but is that Mittelstadt is a perfect fit for what Colorado needs as a 2C who plays a transition game, who plays with speed and everything that Colorado values, right? And Byram is another left-handed defenseman for their top 4, and it does seem like he's played the right, but it does seem like what Buffalo's missing was a partner for Rasmus. God, now I want to call him Rasmus Sandin. Rasmus Dahlin. There's too many Rasmuses. And I'm not sure that Byram is that, but if he isn't, then he's a partner for power. So, he's definitely not somebody who's not going to fit in their lineup. He's just somebody who the fit isn't quite as clear as Mittelstadt. but definitely I think both teams are like, yeah, we won today.
Well, that's a really good point about the left shot, right shot, because actually NHL Network was talking about that as well. They were saying this almost the same exact thing that you just did there, which is, it makes sense for Buffalo to add a really young and good defender, but that shot, alignment is getting kind of jumbled. So they might be not done yet either in trying to balance that out. But that was in response to Jeffrey Jenks, who said, "Guy Sabre fan here. What's your overall impression of the trade?" Jeff, thanks again for your contribution. He says now, as a follow-up, "I totally agree. I've wondered if Byram gets flipped in another trade now, to be honest. Now, I can't say whether or not that happens, but I mean, it's been a crazy day already, so who knows?" Evan, but what are your impressions of the trade, I guess, in terms of who won it, if that's a thing?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in agreement with Ezra where it helps everybody, for sure. And I think when you look at it, particularly after the Sean Walker and Ryan Johansen trade, which, side note, Brennan Vogt, called me after his rehab and was like, "What is going on?" Reminded me that Johansen was the one that poked Darcy Kemper's eye in the first round of the playoffs in 2022. So he nearly ended that, which was kind of interesting. But anyway, I digress. So with Sean Walker then coming into the Avs, you had three lefties and 3 righties, and you had to force kind of somebody out, right? I think a lot of people kind of caught on to that after that move was made. And I think I tweeted it like 10 minutes before the trade was announced for Mittelstadt and Byram, was that one of Byram, Gerard, Manson, maybe could have put in that category, could have been forced out.
And Evan Rawl had posted that Byram was not at practice this morning.
He was sick,
so it was like, oh, it's got to be Byram.
So it's confirmed now that the Avalanche lie on there.
It's been confirmed a lot of times.
Yeah, they'll be like, "He's sick, man. He's sick. He's got I've gotten traded to the Buffalo Sabres Blues, man." But yeah,
sorry, Evan, I cut you off.
No, it's fine. I think I was going to say, so it's similar, at least with Byram's sense, that he kind of got forced out, and it's kind of similar for Mittelstadt. He was kind of forced out too there in Buffalo. You had Tage Thompson and then Peyton Krebs. Those are 2 very, very good forwards.
And Dylan Cousins.
And Dylan Cousins. There you go. That was the 3rd one. So like those are 3 very good forwards that are the future of the Sabres, right? Yeah. And so you kind of have to decide, who do you want to go with at this point. Tage Thompson was, I think, automatically always going to be there, but then you have to decide on kind of those 3. Where do you go with that? And Casey Mittelstadt kind of ended up being the odd man out. So both teams, I guess, get a need that they need for their team. And at least in the Avs sense, it helps with their cap space again, in particular. Buffalo's, I'm not 100% sure about. I have to go look at their cap friendly, but I just think it's good for both teams in particular. I don't really think that there's a winner and loser in this scenario. I think kind of the real winner here is getting Ryan Johansen off the books. And getting somebody to take on that contract. So maybe we can go into that one too about like winner,
I was
loser.
I was gonna say I sent out a tweet, which I don't want to beat up on the guy because he's a human being, he has family, and it's really an unfortunate situation for Johansen. But just imagine, you go from being signed for $8 million AAV to being traded to what's kind of a rival in the Colorado Avalanche for the Predators. And they pay $4 million for you to play for someone else. That team in turn trades you. And in order for the other team to take on your cap hit, they have to send a 1st-round pick in 2026. And then that team immediately puts you on waivers. That is like cataclysmic disaster for an NHL career. What's next for Ryan Johansen, Ezra?
Well, I think he did a decent job of switching his mindset to play like a bottom 6 player for Colorado.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the speed to do it here. And he's getting paid too much to be justified as a bottom 6 player with this $4 million contract. But I could see him coming back into the league after a buyout this summer, or 1 year of playing out this contract. I could see him sticking around in the league as a bottom 6 guy, because he is still a smart player. He is still a big guy. He still plays well and can pass well when he's not being asked to play with speed. It's just that the Colorado system is all about playing with speed, and doesn't have it anymore. I mean, I think it gets lost, but he had Achilles surgery over the summer.
Yeah, true.
He's still recovering from that to an extent. Obviously, he's cleared to play, but like you don't have your full legs back under you from after a surgery like that for a little while. So there's a chance that he revives his career on a, like a Thomas Tatar style $1 million deal. This is assuming that he gets bought out by Philadelphia, but and then maybe he can work his way into being like a third line guy somewhere for a couple of years before he retires. But it could also be the case that he's like, all right, well, I've made my money. I'm getting paid $8 million next year anyway. I'm going to go to the beach, so he can do whatever he wants. It's a great career. It's sad that it's gotten to a point where it feels like it's ending on a down note if it ends now, but he did have a great career.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like you said, he'll be known most in Colorado for this brief stint and for poking Darcy Kemper's eye nearly out of his head on accident. But it's like you never wish that we all wanted Ryan Johansen to be the answer at 2C. I think that's why he was brought in. Was the Avs thought if we can bring this guy in and get our 2C at the deadline, we can go get those pieces. Any piece we need, we can get if Johansen can come in here and do it. They knew it was a risk, and so they said, all right, we're going to risk it with this one here. We'll swallow the cash if we have to. But they always knew, it feels like, that they could trade him and they could figure out a way to get that contract off the books if they had to. And they've successfully done that. And I think it's better than a buyout for me because there's not going to be that in-between limbo for both the Avalanche and Ryan Johansen where the writing is already on the wall. It's been on the wall. He's had a good month with the Avalanche, and that's made things kind of slightly more confusing, but he's still not the 2C, and that's the role he was brought in to fill, and he hasn't done that. And so I hope he stays in the league, but I agree with you. It'll be as like a bottom six forward, and he'll be on one of the teams that is more of a dump and chase team rather than a fast and, transition-based team. But, going back to who the Avs got in return for him, which is a defender that seems to fill the void for Bowen Byram, at least in some sense, maybe not in terms of, him being here next season, but what is it about what the Avs have gotten in return from Philadelphia that you're excited about, Evan?
Yeah, I was gonna say we should talk about Sean Walker because even though he was kind of overshadowed 20 minutes after his trade here, Sean Walker is a reliable defender. I went back and was looking back at an article that I wrote on milehighhockey.com going over all of these trades. 29 years old. He hasn't been super great. He only has 6 goals and 16 assists in 63 games. And his highest point total is only 24. And that came with the Kings in the shortened 2019-2020 season. But while he's not maybe putting up point totals per se, he is very similar Devon Taves-esque. He's really good at moving the puck, and that's going to bode wonders for whichever pairing he is with. I think right now at this moment, I don't think you really want to break up the top 4 that you currently have. I think he'll slot in pretty much with Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson will be Jack Johnson, stay-at-home defender. Do exactly what he needs to do as an NHL veteran, right? So that might give Sean Walker a little bit more freedom to kind of move around, pass the puck, get into the nitty-gritty areas of the corners that Bednar loves to do with his defenders. So we'll have to see kind of how he pans out. He's definitely the one with a little bit more of a question mark around him, I would think. But hey, I think he will do just fine. And I hope he does more than just fine. I say so. We'll just have to see kind of how he fits in, where he fits in. If they decide they really do want to break up that top 4, I'd maybe put him with Manson or Girard and put one of those other 2 down with Jack Johnson. So we'll have to see how he's utilized. But I am happy for Walker, and I'm happy to see what he can bring to the Avalanche.
Yeah, same here. My initial reaction was on X. I put out, that I looked at his stuff on Money Puck, and what stuck out to me was that he gets a lot of shots towards the net, and a lot of them end up as rebounds, which I think is a good attribute to have with this team, especially if you are on that second pair and you kind of get paired up with that second and third line, there's a lot of guys who like to go into the hard areas on those two lines. So I think that really bodes well for Sean. And, you get the 5th round back in 2026 from Philadelphia as well. And there's a condition to the 1st round pick. Do we know what that condition is, Evan?
Yeah, I went and looked. Oh, top 10. There you go. What Ezra said. It is protected top 10.
Okay. Protected top 10.
Yes. And I should also mention it is 2025. It is not this year's 1st round pick.
Right.
So
exactly. Makes sense.
That I'm happy with, because I initially saw it was 1st round and I was like, oh man, I wanted to hang on to that 1st round for this year. But I think right now I'm fine with that 2025 1st round pick going away. Well, I'd have to look at the draft classes. I know that obviously this year's is nowhere near the same as last year's was, and I couldn't even tell you what 2025's is. So maybe something to explore later on, perhaps Friday in a sneak peek show.
There you go.
I'll tease right now.
There you go. Yeah. So good segue there, Evan. Folks, if you're enjoying this program, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow Colorado Avalanche fans, and turn your alerts on so that you know every time we are live. And we will be live on Friday still to do holy Moses. Hopefully we don't do that live, but to do some more trade deadline coverage, kind of while things roll in. You know how it goes. It's usually like an hour and a half past the deadline is when, the trades are all really done because of how things go through. But we have almost 700 people tuned in right now, and I just said doo-doo. So congratulations, Adrian. You did it again. But let's keep going with this trade here, and we'll get into our bold predictions here in a couple of minutes because we have to rehash some from last week. And this will be a fun time to do our bold predictions with the trade deadline coming and all this madness happening. But I guess my overall question, which I think is the overarching question every single year the trade deadline comes and goes. But Ezra, are the Avalanche a better team today than they were yesterday?
Absolutely. I'm so excited for these changes to show how they're going to work, because I really think that Casey Mittelstadt makes a huge difference in the lineup. It puts Ross Colton where he belongs on the 3rd line. It gives everybody a little more positional security, and it makes it clear how these forward lines are going to work. And he's a wonderful player. It's going to be really fun to watch him, because I've watched enough Sabres games to know that, but not enough Sabres games to really relish it and understand it completely, So I'm excited to see him in the burgundy and blue. And then you have to be excited about Sean Walker too, because he is, if you look at the D pairs, I think he definitely belongs on that 3rd pair, because he is Evan's got something. What's up?
Oh boy. You all are not going to like this at all. So yeah, I have my phone open here and I've been looking at Slack and all that. Elliot Friedman, not sure where all this is going to go, but hearing Vegas has entered the Noah Hannafin conversation.
Oh boy. Well, they got to do something now. They got to do something now.
With the Avs getting Sean Walker and Dallas getting Chris Tanev, Vegas needs to do something. So that would help their defense massively, absolutely, and they have the cap space for it, just as they magically do every year.
And they got Mantha earlier in the week too.
Anthony
correct?
Mantha, yep. Mm-hmm. So I guess sorry, Ezra.
It's okay.
If you have more, do you have more things to talk about? Because I want to touch on this too. Maybe.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing.
Yeah,
I think that Walker does end up on the 3rd pair, because we've seen the Manson-Johnson combo. That's the only thing that I'm afraid of with everything that's happened, is seeing more of Manson-Johnson together, because it has not worked. So keep Manson with Girard, let Walker be a 3rd pair guy, but give him extra minutes, because he's shown in his time in Philadelphia that he can be a very good penalty killer despite his stature. A lot of people look at smaller defensemen and think they can't kill penalties. Colorado's not a place like that, because Girard obviously is such a big factor on the kill. And I think that's something to look at too, is getting Makar off the penalty kill a little bit more and giving Walker some of his minutes there. I think that's a good
great point. That's a great point, because you're going to keep Cale fresh, because Cale says he's not injured, but I mean, we also were told Bowen Byram was sick today, so take that with a grain of salt.
We've watched Cale labor through the end of shifts multiple times in the last week, and he's telling us he's not injured. Come on, man.
Come on now. Yeah.
He's not hurt so bad he can't play.
Let the record show we have no insight, so we don't know, but we're just using our eyes and our brains. and 2 and 2, can be tied together. But I agree with you on a lot of what you had to say there, Ezra, because I'm excited that the Avs have seemed to address their holes, other than possibly the backup goaltender, which may or may not sort itself out internally. They seem to have done that, and all of a sudden saved money. But Evan, let's talk about what now is starting to feel like an arms race out in the West, with Vegas adding people, Dallas adding people, and obviously Colorado Avalanche doing what I would consider a splash trade today, which is always the key phrase. Would you agree that this was a splash, and talk about the arms race out in the West?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to kind of answer the original question, I do think that this Avs team got better. And I'm not going to, I won't beat a dead horse too much, but Mittelstadt's great. Walker, that's a really good point about getting him on the penalty kill and taking Cale Makar off of it, giving him some more rest and ability to have offensive prowess heading into the playoffs. But when you think about this arms race in particular, it's on now, right? I mean, Vancouver has Elias Lindholm, who now they're maybe flipping for Jake Gensel, and who knows what's coming out of that. Yeah. Vegas making moves. They have obviously Amantha. Apparently now Noah Hannafin's in the conversation, all that. And then you still have Mark Stone, who's on LTIR, Jack Eichel, who just came back, and whatnot. And Vegas is kind of in a free fall right now. So they need people, they need bodies, and Noah Hannafin will do that. Dallas is very good. That is one team I would not like to face in the playoffs, despite our record against them this year. But Chris Tanev will help with that. Their goaltending has been phenomenal. And of course, there's always Joe Pavelski that's over there crushing Avs hearts. So yeah, I think that was going to be kind of my question too, and pose it to both of you about the goaltending. Because if there's really one thing that I think that majority of Avs fans would want to improve on, is the backup goaltender. And they have the cap space for it. Absolutely, they do. And when you only have one goaltender, at least right now, set in stone for next year with Georgiev, I think his contract expires after the end of next season, right? If I'm not mistaken. So you're going to need a goaltender, right? Do you go for a guy right now? Do you do like a 1A, 1B, or do you just find the backup? What do you do? Because you have the money for it now. And I'm wondering what you all think, what our listeners think. I don't know. I'm like I said earlier, I'm like 50-50 on it. I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Ez.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love what Annunen has showed us, right? I mean, he looks the part of an NHL goaltender in the last few starts, and he didn't in his first few starts. So, that's positive progress. But it is important to remember that it was against the Chicago Blackhawks, who don't really have an NHL lineup. So it's not enough for me to say I feel confident in Annunen being the second guy, because no team wins the cup losing their starting goalie is something people say all the time. But then the last two cup winners have lost their starting goalie for stretches. So it's not true. You have to have a second guy who you think can play games if necessary. And Annunen maybe is that guy. He maybe is, but I don't think it's reasonable to go into this playoff season with confidence in that. I think it's reasonable to go in with hope. I think it's reasonable to keep him around as maybe Georgiev's replacement after next year, maybe backup next year, replacement after that, maybe. I still think he's got potential. I like him, but bringing in somebody who is a little bit more proven as a veteran, who can take that job this year, makes a lot of sense to me. And it's something that I've heard a lot from Eric on DNVR. Not to plug another show, I do listen to them though. He keeps talking about how it is. He keeps talking about how Georgiev needs a mentor. Somebody who's been there before and can get him through, the struggles of being a playoff starting goaltender. Not somebody who's going to take his job, but somebody who's going to be there for him, to help him, guide him through it in a way that a coach can't, and in a way that like a veteran forward can't, because he's not a goalie. He doesn't get it, And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Having never played the position, I don't know what it's like, but it just makes sense to me, knowing a lot of goalies. They do need someone to talk to, They're crazy
That's a good
people.
point.
So
Yeah.
I think that makes sense to me. A veteran goalie makes a lot of sense to me. Having cap space is great. I don't think it needs to be an expensive guy. I don't think it needs to be somebody who you're like, oh yeah, he could start. I think it just needs to be somebody who's like been there.
Yeah, Jackie talks a lot about that too, like about it being delicate in terms of like not bringing somebody in who's going to challenge Gorgiev for that starting role, because like for Gorgiev's sake, you want him to know that he's the starter. And I agree with you in terms of like the mental aspect of having a veteran backup and someone to confide in and lean on, and inside of that nutty fraternity that is goalkeeping in the NHL. So it's like I get it and I agree with that. I think we've talked about Jake Allen before. That one kind of makes sense to me. The Avs usually make a yearly trade with the Canadians, so I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happened. My buddy is a huge Canadians fan, and we joke about it every trade deadline. It's like, I'll see you at, a couple days before, we'll be chatting, but we'll see if that sort of thing happens. My initial reaction is it's kind of one of those things where the Avs are kind of playing chess, not in terms of like, oh, everyone's playing checkers and they're playing chess, which kind of is true, but they're doing their best to put risk inside of their lineup in areas that they think they can afford to. I don't think that they were comfortable with risking not having a 2C. That's why you saw what happened today. I don't think that they're comfortable with lacking that killing forward. So I think Evan was right in hoping and predicting that Landeskog is coming back and that the Avalanche are very confident in that. So I think a lot of that stuff is in play, and I think where they've landed and decided to keep their risk is pretty much where they had it in 2022, which is in the net. Kemper coming into the playoffs, he looked great. Numbers were great. Wins were great. But still, he kind of had some questions to answer. He got hurt. We saw Frankie come in and absolutely do his thing. So, like Ezra said, the last two teams who've won have done so with a good backup goalie. Now, you look at this season, you look at the Colorado Avalanche as they're constructed right now. You've got Justus Annunen, who's back-to-back shutouts, as we've said. And then you also got Prosvetov down in the AHL, who's absolutely on a tear with the Eagles. So I think the Avs have said, we're going to put our risk in the guy who's doing really well in the NHL and in the kid who just had back-to-back shutouts over what is now the youngest and most phenomenal player in Connor Bedard. So I think that they're putting their chips on the table, and they're going and betting with Annunen, Prosvetov, and Gorgiev. That's my reaction, Evan.
That's a good point about Prosvetov too. We didn't even touch on him and how he's been absolutely dominating the AHL right now. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. I think if they really make any other moves, it's goaltending like a Jake Allen, like Damo says, or a 4C like we were talking about earlier. So there's a little less than 48 hours now for the trade deadline. So we will see.
We will find out. So we still got some people here from. Go ahead, Ez.
I like the Jake Allen idea. They have the cap space for it now. He does have another year on his contract, which gives me pause because if Annunen is supposed to eventually take over, then that's blocking. But kind of cool to bring him in for the playoff run and then flip him from just get the same picks from somebody else. Yeah. I don't think that that's an unreasonable idea. There aren't a lot of veteran goalies with playoff experience out there right now because Marc-Andre Fleury's off the market. The name that my pipe dream name, which it worked the first time with center, would be Semyon Varlamov. Same problem. God. He's got a long deal, but you bring him in for the cup run, you ship him back out. I don't know. It's not going to happen. But there's just not a lot of guys. The only other one the one that was in circulation a bit was Alex Nedeljkovic, but he doesn't have that playoff pedigree, so that doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense to me. And then, I don't really know where you look. There's not a lot of veteran goalies on the market. So, we'll see.
That's why to me, it's Jake Allen or it's nobody, but I'm not right. I'm not right about that, but I agree with you. It would be so cool to get Varley back. It's like, you know what, Varley, let's get you one. Let's get
That
you
would,
one,
Yeah,
guy.
I mean,
that
the
would be
Islanders haven't
something.
quit on the season yet
Hey,
either.
Patrick
so
Waugh's back in the league, so Semyon Varlamov naturally has to be a Colorado Avalanche again.
That was going to be my comment was that Varley got along with Patrick Waugh pretty well this the first year anyway. So he might want to stay with him, but
yeah,
who knows? I do want to put
Love
out
a
this
dreamer.
thing though. There you go, Billy.
James
Yeah.
Reimer.
James Reimer, that's an option. Yeah, but I want to put this one out there. This one, if you thought Varley was a pipe dream, this one's like Super Mario pipe dream here. Because I don't know how he's there. You go, right? He has somehow been in trade conversations. Jeremy Swayman from Boston.
Well, yeah,
that would
he's
be
harder though.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't think that
like
happen.
I said, Super Mario pipe dream right there.
Yeah.
I don't know why he's been in trade conversations, but he has for some reason. But that would be very much. I feel like Georgiev would definitely be threatened there and would not have that at all.
I mean, Georgiev would be backing him up.
It would be
that's
a
nice winner right there.
It would be a nice 1A, 1B though that Boston's currently running. So
dangerous 1A, 1B.
One can dream.
I think the reason he's coming up is because he is an expiring restricted free agent contract right now. But they're going to extend him and they're going to trade Omar. That has to happen.
Well, let's get back to the trade of the day, and then let's get into our bold prediction, the trades of the day. But I guess the trade of the day is definitely Bowen Byram, 1-for-1 for Casey Mittelstadt. And we got some Sabre fans tuning in right now. He's a diehard Sabre fan here. Thoughts about the deal? Mitt's not a good face-off guy, less than average shot. Don't go to the net. Good passer, though. Seems like he's happy that Mitts, as they call him, that's a pretty cool nickname. And then we got Peterman says Mitts at 2C. I think he meant to say like Mitts at 2C. Some didn't like giving up Byram. In my personal opinion, I think Byram needed space to spread his wings. We talked a little bit about that, Ezra, and be a top pair guy. That is kind of where he's projected as a draft pick, was to be a top pair guy. So totally. And then he says, I think that he can be Dahlin's partner in Buffalo. We talked about that as well. So yeah, great comment there. And honestly, after talking with Ezra and Evan, I think we all are in agreement that this trade makes sense for both sides and that it might be tilted in the Avs' favor just slightly because they did such a good job of filling their holes and the voids in their roster. Rather, Buffalo's adding a great defender, but the picture over there is unclear still for them, whereas the Avalanche seem to have formed at least a version of what will be their roster and forward group going into the playoffs. And one last thing from Sabres Nation says, is Byram injury prone? He's missed some games for sure. I think his games missed is kind of heavily skewed based on all that time he missed for concussion problems. So I think as long as he can stay out of the woods in terms of that, you can kind of count on him to be just like any other player. The game in, game out injuries happen and stuff like that. But I think I have faith in Byram. I think that so do the Sabres. Otherwise, they wouldn't have traded for him, especially giving up their leading scorer. So I think you're in good hands over there with Bowen Byram. This program will once again thank one Bowen Byram for his time here as a Colorado Avalanche, a Stanley Cup champion. And we have 835 people tuned into our program live right now. So thank you folks so much for tuning in. I'm Adrian with Ezra and Evan, and it really means a lot to have this sort of feedback and interaction as we do this on a weekly basis. The Mile High Hockey Lab, you can see us and other content at milehighhockey.com, and our full catalog is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So something that we do on a weekly basis is called the Bold Predictions. And essentially what we do there is we have since dubbed them Bold Hopes, because typically we like to manifest realities. And what we do is you get a ding if you're correct in predicting something that is very bold. So let's talk about last week's bold predictions. Evan, you said there will be a hat trick this week.
Can I hide, please?
Yeah, you were right. But for the other side,
God,
no Avs hat tricks last week. Ezra,
blew up right in my face.
Ezra, you said Chris Wagner would have 2 points. That didn't happen either.
No. Did he even get one?
No. I think did we get one? I think we got one.
No, I thought I was asking if Wagner got a point.
Oh no, he did not get a point.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
And then I said that the Avs would go undefeated in the next 3 games, which are Chicago, Nashville, and Chicago. And as we all know, That did not happen. I even said they'd get him in regulation. All games ended in regulation, so I don't know if that counts for anything. But then we had Jackie, who's usually our bold predictions ace in the hole, and she said, we're going to have a shutout in the next 3 games. I think you get 1, and I think you get 2 for that. She also has on the board for the future that Nuke Nichushkin will score in his first game back, which we haven't even touched on really, which Valerian Nichushkin likely to return to the lineup on Friday. Won't play tonight against the Detroit Red Wings, which we also haven't even talked about. The Avs versus Red Wings tonight, so that'll be cool.
I'm excited for Jean-Luc Foudy to play.
Yeah, Jean-Luc Foudy. We were talking about
go.
the possibilities there. We could see another name kind of rise up into the cream of the crop and make things even easier for management in Colorado. But let's play the music and give this week's bold predictions.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. I call that bold talk.
All right, so here's how this is going to work. I think if you don't have a trade deadline related bold prediction as your bold prediction, come up with one. So if you
automatic X if you don't.
Yeah. So you can give 2, 1 trade and 1 not trade related. So I will give the floor to you, Ezra.
Okay. I will say my not trade related prediction is that Casey Mittelstadt scores in his first Avalanche game. Not the boldest, but I'm sticking with it. Not an assist though, a goal.
Just to
And my trade related prediction, let's see. I wanted to have like 5 minutes to pick a specific player, but I don't have that. So I'm going to say Colorado does bring in a 4th line center, and it's somebody who we haven't even discussed. Like it's just somebody like fully off the board.
Yeah, I could see that happening. In fact, this morning before all the madness, I said in reaction to DNVR, they did their roster roast, which is excellent content. But they kind of scalded the fans for their Crosby hopes, which I understand because it is very unrealistic in certain aspects. But I thought it was interesting, and I said, we all know that the Avs are just going to go get a 4th line center and a 7th D, but can we at least have fun for a few more hours? Well, it seems like they got kind of like a middle D, and then now they still need to get that 4C unless, like Evan talked about, they're super confident that Landeskog is coming back. That solves a lot of problems. So, Evan, what's your bold prediction this week? 2 bold predictions this week.
Yeah, so I guess both of them are sort of trade related, but that's besides the point. So Ezra took mine about Casey Mittelstadt scoring in his first game. It's okay. That was an easy one. I was going to take it anyway. I understand it. So I'll go to the other guy. I'll go with Sean Walker. I think he will get at least a point in his debut. Jack Johnson has been doing pretty good the last few games, and quite honestly, the bottom 6 has been doing pretty well the last few games. So I think that's a pretty good prediction there. And I guess the actual trade prediction one is that the Avalanche are done with trades.
Avs are done.
As much as I hope they aren't done, and they maybe bring in at least I would agree with like a veteran goaltender who's been in the show and done playoff runs before. I think they're gonna rock with Anunin and Prosvetov and Georgiev. So that's a little reverse bold prediction jinx there.
I see what you did there. I like that like I said before we introduced the segment, this is slightly bold predictions and sort of bold hopes. We are now hoping that Casey Mittelstadt scores a goal specifically in his first, and that Sean Walker gets a point at least in his debut. And Evan, you say that the Avs are done. Ezra, you say that the Avs will trade for their 4C as your bold prediction. So let me round things out. I will say, so right now, actually on the line, we got Nuke scoring a goal. We got Casey Mittelstadt scoring a goal in his return. And we got Walker scoring a goal in his debut. So
just a
figure
point, not a goal, just a point.
Sorry, a point. Sorry. So I figure let's just go with somebody who's been around for a little bit, and I'm gonna say we're gonna get a Mikko Rantanen hat trick this week.
That would be big for him and his line and fueling up for this, I guess, last month and a half of regular season hockey.
Yes, and then my boldest of bold predictions, is, and I talked about it already, the Colorado Avalanche will trade and acquire Jake Allen from the Montreal Canadiens. That's my bold prediction because, as I said before, every single year you see the Habs and the Avs make a deal, and that hasn't happened yet. So it's gonna. I always say that they're due, and they are still. So those are the bold predictions this week. Hopefully, all of them happen because then we can hand out 6 dings on next week's episode. As we talked about a little,
I'm fine with it being 5 or 6.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take 50% anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that at least the trade ones we will figure out by our Friday show.
Exactly.
Which you want to talk more about it, Adrian?
Yeah, I was about to tease that. So what we're going to do on Friday, I believe we decided at deadline time, or is it a half hour before the deadline hits?
Noon Mountain Time, so 1 hour before.
Yeah, so we're going at noon Mountain Time, an hour before the deadline strikes the NHL to see how the dust settles on this trade madness. Obviously, the Avalanche have already done plenty of work acquiring Casey Mittelstadt in exchange for Bowen Byram in a 1-1, and obviously sending that first round over with Ryan Johansen to the Flyers for Walker. So we already have something to talk about on Friday, but hey, like I said, my bold prediction is they might trade for Jake Allen. So hopefully we get off of this program, and then tomorrow they trade for Jake Allen, and then on Friday we can talk about how, Ado's bold prediction was so awesome, and we'll just press the ding button the entire program because that's just amazing. But let's just, wrap things up real quick with our final thoughts on the Avalanche and their day of work. We'll put it this way to you, Ezra. Is this yet again another chapter in the masterclass of what is McFarland and Joe Sakic's work as the front office in Colorado?
I think it is. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. That's what determines how successful it is. But I love the moves. I love the vision for the roster, and I love the willingness to really make a swing. Because giving up on Byram, or not giving up on him, but we both did this, Adrian.
Right? Yeah.
It's not giving up on him, but letting him flourish somewhere else is a hard pill to swallow. But I think it was the right one for this.
Yeah.
It was the medicine this roster needed.
Jackie would be like, "That's telling that you guys say that." She'd be like, "Yeah, we are giving up on Bowen Byram." But no, I'm
the writing was on the wall when.
Yeah.
The writing was not on the wall. The writing was on Devon Taves' contract.
Yeah. So that's I like Evan mentioned earlier. I had to walk back some comments and write the exact words I was wrong on X today because, as you guys remember, I was saying, well, if you're not gonna extend Devon Taves, you have to trade him, and he's gonna get you a 2C. And a part of that article was I was like, Bo Byram will never get you a 2C, neither will Sam Girard. I was wrong, and I'm super happy I was wrong about that, because instead of my world where you don't have Canada's top pair anymore, you now have Canada's top pair still, Casey Mittelstadt, a true 2C, and your defensive group is maybe less. The future might not be as bright, but the right now is just fine. So that's my thoughts on the way things have shaken out today. What are your final thoughts, Evan?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good step in the right direction for sure. It keeps your cup window open a little bit more, and you get a couple of solid guys in, particularly with 2C. We, knock on wood, hopefully don't have to have this conversation for the next, how many years did we have it now? 2-3 years. So that might answer that. We'll figure out defense if Sean Walker's there, or if maybe Sam Malinsky ends up being promoted full-time in the NHL with Caleb Jones, or somewhere else along those lines, with goaltending maybe perhaps later this week or beyond. We'll just kind of have to wait and see what happens. We'll have a little bit of a holdout, at least tonight, for the Detroit game as of the recording of this episode, and maybe we'll see the two new guys in action Friday night against the good old rival that is the Minnesota Wild.
With Val Nichushkin.
That too.
That's right.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Right, exactly. That'd be
What a so
nasty. It's gonna be nasty. Well,
there may or may not be a reason why I wore this hoodie. I might have to prepare to buy more of those. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, thank you folks so much for tuning into the program. We have about 900 people tuned in right now live. So thank you guys so much, and gals and people, for joining us and giving us your contributions as well. We really love the interaction. If you enjoy this program, please give us a follow on X at MHH_lab. That's all caps, MHH_lab. You can also follow the website, milehighhockey.com, at milehighhockey. I'm Adrian Hernandez. I'm here with Ezra and Evan. And guys, since we have so many lovely people tuned into the program, I like to do this from time to time. Why don't you guys do a little shameless plug on something you might be working on outside of hockey?
Sure. Okay. I also do a lot of comedy stuff. You can follow me on Instagram at Ezra Partier for I repost all of that, or just follow the Daily Misinformer at Daily Misinformer on all the things, and you'll get some political hot takes, jokes, and stuff.
Oh, fun!
Out who I really am.
Exactly.
Fun to announce that to almost 900 people.
Pull the veil off of the hockey persona of Ezra. But
well, we got a couple million people already watching it.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say it's actually a program that does pretty well without our promotion anyway. So, and I love it. So thank you for your work, Evan. What do you got for us?
I will do one hockey and one non-hockey. Is the three of us and a few others. We also contribute to a site called Puck Yeti, puckyeti.com, at Puck Yeti on Twitter/X. Just another site where we do pretty much exactly what we do now with Mile High Hockey, where we do Avalanche coverage, all of that comprehensive action that you want around the Avalanche. Just another startup, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then the one non-hockey thing I will do is that I also do social media for a company that covers NASCAR. We are at Daily Downforce. So give that a follow on all social media platforms. We are pretty much everywhere. So my hands are always full with that too. So balancing that and hockey is sometimes a little hard. So I'm glad there was no NASCAR things today and I could just focus on abs.
I was going to say that's a kind of a balancing act sometimes, I imagine, especially later on in the year like this. It's kind of, you really got a lot to cover there, but that's really cool, man. The NASCAR has a good thing going on, and I follow a lot of your coverage through that. You do a great job, man. So keep it up with that. And of course, I'll do my shameless plug. Those of you who don't know, I'm in a band called Just a Feeling. We make pop punk rock music, alternative rock music. The intro and the outro of this program are actually songs made by the band Just a Feeling. So if you want to check out some more music by us, head on over to Apple Music and Spotify, pretty much anything, and just search Just a Feeling. Our latest single is NFI, so you can check that out. It's a great song, and I appreciate you folks so much for tuning in. Signing off here from the Mile High Hockey Lab, I'm Adrian Hernandez. I'm with Ezra Parter and Evan Liu. It's really been an honor and a privilege to bring you some Colorado Avalanche coverage on such a crazy day. But here's to a tomorrow where we can all agree that the Colorado Avalanche have gotten better today. Thank you so much. Go Avs, go.
Thank you for tuning into the Mile High Hockey Lab.